It's week 12, and today we have a jam-packed show. We have our week 12 predictions, our best bets. We're going to talk about some futures of some NFL teams as well. It's going to be a jam-packed show. Amir, let's get into it. We usually kick off the show with our power rankings, but don't worry, they're going to be coming soon. I want to dive into this week 12 slate because there's a lot of games that can go either way. Last week, of course, I was 10-4, Amir 9-5. On the year, you see our records. We're not perfect, but we're pretty good, as we like to say here on the channel. Now, Amir, the game slate starts tonight. Of course, we're Browns fans, and we're somewhat excited for this game here against the Steelers on Thursday Night Football. Some would say it's a trap game. It could be, but honestly, I don't see a lot of avenues where the Browns can actually pull out this win against Mike Tomlin and company. But we agree that we're going to have Pittsburgh in that one, Houston there. We're going to come back to this NFC North matchup, of course, between Minnesota and Chicago. But outside of that, we agree on every other game in the early slate. Washington, Miami, Kansas City getting back on track. Tampa Bay getting a much-needed win. And Detroit on the road continuing to dominate. We'll talk about those in a moment. But Amir, before we dive into Minnesota and Chicago, your quick thoughts on this Browns-Steelers matchup. Chubb, of course, in this game last year, it wasn't pretty.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this Pittsburgh defense is obviously legit. The only promise that we honestly have as Browns fans, with the Browns is the fact that we won 6 straight Thursday night games, if I'm not mistaken. And on top of that, these past 5 weeks, Pittsburgh's pass defense is ranked around the 18 mark. So, their pass defense has been a bit, shaky at times, and we've honestly seen some flaws in them giving up big plays and big games and stuff like that. We know Jameis loves to throw the ball, 35 plus times a game, this year, and so that's the only promise that we do have is just air the ball out. What I'm worried about is him turning the ball over. I understand, there's been 2 games where he hasn't turned the ball over, and the Chargers game where he turned the ball over 3 times, but I'm not going to forget the fact that, against Baltimore, against a terrible defense, he could have thrown like 4 picks that game. And so now he's playing against Pittsburgh, a team that's notorious for forcing turnovers. That's really what I'm worried about. And there's not really many ways that we can really win this game unless, it's a divisional game, it's the NFL, so anything can happen.
Yeah, any given Sunday, it's definitely got to be the mindset. Now, Amir, I want to ask you this. Now, this has not been a great season as Browns fans. We know that, right? A lot of course, animosity around Deshaun Watson and how that situation has played out so far. But this year, obviously, has not gone to plan. Now, I want to bring this up. The last 5 Browns head coaches have been fired directly after a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kevin Stefanski, 2-time coach of the year in a 4-year span. Amir, is there any belief, any chance in your mind that if we lose tonight, this could be the last day as a Cleveland Brown for Kevin Stefanski?
I say in this case, absolutely not. And the biggest reason why is because I say for Stefanski, he's kind of different than all of our past coaches. It's not only the fact that he's the best coach that we've had in a long time, but
yes,
it's mainly the fact that I say he's probably the one coach out of the past 5 coaches that has gotten fired after a Steelers matchup. I'd say for him, he's the only one that truly had his hand in management.
yes.
I feel like Stefanski is really higher up than just coaching. He has honestly, like the bigger say when it comes to recruiting players, drafting players, sort of building up personnel. And so I say absolutely not.
Before we move on to the late slate, I want to talk about this Minnesota and Chicago game. Definitely, probably the game that's going to have the most eyeballs here in the early window on Sunday, of course. Minnesota has won 4 straight games. They come into this game at 8-2. They're 4-1 on the road this season, and we're going to talk about the deep analytics here in just a moment. Now, Chicago at home, you're 4-6. It is the second game with the new offensive coordinator, and not a lot of fans are happy with Caleb Williams for 1, and for 2, Matt Eberflus. Maybe some changes are going to be made here if some things don't change quickly here in Chicago. But I wanted to bring up this interesting stat because I wanted to look into it because Caleb Williams has been sacked 18 times this year, by far and away the most as far as the rookie class of quarterbacks. Now, Brian Flores, against rookie quarterbacks in his career as a head coach or defensive coordinator, he is 7-1 against them. I had a typo there, but Flores is 7-1 against rookie quarterbacks in his career, and he blitzes 39% of plays here in Minnesota. And of course, Chicago struggles to protect Caleb this year. So I think that could be a deciding factor, but at home is always an advantage for the Bears. Divisional game, always tough there, no matter how you want to say. But Amir, your thoughts on this matchup? You're going with the underdog here, and you're sticking with Caleb Williams.
Well, looking at Caleb Williams' first game without Waldron last game, it's about time to let him just play free and air the ball out. I think the recent weeks, with Waldron, with Eberflus really having his hand, in the play calling offense. The biggest problem I've noticed with Caleb is that he's been playing too conservative. Basically scared to make mistakes, and also the offensive line has been terrible this year. But like seeing last game, seeing them get DJ Moore involved, and Roman involved a lot more. That right there really you can honestly build off of that. And really, I mean, Chicago doesn't get that field goal block. They honestly beat Green Bay. And so I think going into this week, I think Sam Darnold's going to have a tough time against the Bears defense. Sam Darnold hit a huge decline ever since, I say really ever since that game against the Jets. I think it was about week 4 or week 5 where he really struggled. And ever since then, he's hit a huge decline. My biggest concern is that Bears offensive line. We all know Minnesota loves the blitz. But on the back end, Minnesota gives up a lot of big plays, a bunch of big plays. And so I'm leaning towards Chicago. At Chicago here, I love what I saw from Caleb and his offense last week.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the aggressiveness, right? Because it seems as though like Caleb doesn't trust Keenan Allen to make those 50-50 catches. It's like he doesn't trust DJ Moore, these uber talented all pro level wide receivers, to not make these contested catches where they've made a career out of that. But again, if he's a little bit more aggressive, it should be a tight game, but we haven't seen it yet. And I'm going to stick with what we know. And what we know is that Minnesota's handling business this year against the teams that they should. So Minnesota's going to grab this one. Maybe they lose the next one against Chicago, but Minnesota, I'm going to have them grabbing the win. They are improving to 9-2. Amir, I didn't have them winning, I think, 7 games before the season started. And they've already had 8, might even be 9 after this weekend. Now, in the late window, we have Denver winning, of course. Bo Nix continues to roll as sneakily he's making a case to be the best rookie quarterback this year. I want to go that far, but again, he's making an argument. Seattle at home in a tight matchup against Arizona, who we both are really high on, but we're going to have Seattle with the 12th man behind them, getting a big win there. Now, San Fran and Green Bay. Amir, what's going on with San Fran? I mean, they're 5-5. The morale around this team is, in every single interview that I've seen, is down. Right? It seems like this team's lost belief in themselves a little bit. Amir, what's going on in San Fran? Do you think if they lose this one, their season's over?
Honestly, they still have hope, but my biggest concern is that this San Fran team is probably the least aggressive and sort of willing San Fran team I've seen. Honestly, under Stefanski. Like this team is like on both sides of the ball, they aren't the same. The offensive line has been iffy. Offensively they've been solid, but the defense has been really, really shaky. Really, really shaky, giving up big plays, struggling against the run, letting Geno go ahead and just scramble out the pocket and ice the game last week. And so also Stefanski too, man. Like, he's still struggling to really hold leads and come back from games. And also on top of that, the injuries as well. And a huge part of that is Brandon Ayuk, the whole entire offseason scandal, and him coming into the lineup, struggling. And then now he's down with an injury. George Kittle in out the lineup, Jawan Jennings in out the lineup. And so I say for the San Fran team, I was gonna lean towards them. But I mean Green Bay is 7-3 now. It's in Green Bay. It's tough. You just got a major loss against Seattle where they basically just pulled your heart out. And so me personally, I'm leaning towards Green Bay.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Again, Green Bay has a lot more to prove in this game, as crazy as that might sound. Again, they have revenge on their mind. This is the team that took them out in the divisional round of the playoffs last year, and Green Bay's going to want to get their revenge here at home. Like you mentioned, they're rolling, and they're playing pretty good football. As long as Jordan Love doesn't continue to throw 2 picks and 2 interceptions, right, if he could just have a 2-touchdown, no-pick game, I think Green Bay should handle business in this one. But for San Fran, I mean, to be 5-6, last in their division after this week, it's going to be a tough hole to climb out of, especially when you have such a talented group like they do have. Now, Sunday Night Football, I think I could speak for the both of us. If this was the Philadelphia Eagles team after the first month of the season, I think we're both going with the Rams here. But, ever since that point, this team has flipped the switch, and it looks like they just have too much talent and they can beat anybody. Yeah. I will say, it's hard to bet against Sean McVay and this Rams offense, but I'm going to go with Philly on the road there Sunday night. to pick up a big win there. Any thoughts about that talent-filled Sunday night matchup?
Man, shout out Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and Darius Slay. I mean, because they've basically flipped this pass defense in the secondary play to a whole nother level. And last year, the biggest concern was that secondary. But this year, they've been lights out ever since past like week 4, where they kind of started the season off a bit slow. But man, they've been great. Jalen Carter is dominating against the run. And so, really, my biggest concern, though, is that Rams defense, man. Like, Drake May tore them apart last week. And it got to like halfway through the second quarter where I'm like, yo, Drake May actually might smoke the Rams, as a rookie with basically 9 to 5 workers in his receiving core. And my biggest concern now is also the Rams run defense as well. Like Saquon might rush for 150. We've seen this Rams run defense struggle the entire year, all year long. Obviously, they have young pieces that the Eagles could easily exploit, and also the fact that both teams start off way too slow. The Philly starts off slow, the Rams start off slow, which is honestly a pretty bad recipe for the Rams because Philly's going to run them down their throat.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. Now, for Monday night, it's something in Amir. This is only the third time it's ever happened. It is the third rendition of the Harbaugh Bowl, right? Let's dive into this matchup, though. Of course, we disagree on this matchup. I have the Chargers at home getting another big win against an AFC North opponent. Amir, you're taking the Ravens here, and I can't really blame you. John Harbaugh in his career is 2-0 against his brother Jim. Those 2 wins came back in 2014, I believe, or 2012, excuse me. That's, of course, when they met in the regular season. And, of course, the Super Bowl eventually, where that was where the lights went out at halftime and Jacoby Jones had a masterclass of a game. Ravens, of course, won that Super Bowl in Ray Lewis's last dance. But, in his career, again, 2-0. This is the third matchup. Now, for Jim, he's at home. They're 4-1 at home. And this is a team that, if you look before last week, they didn't allow 20 points in the game all season long. This has been the number 1 defense as far as points per game allowed, and they're at home, and this is a team that is rolling. They make minimal mistakes, and they've won 4 straight games. Now, for the Ravens, you're 3-3 on the road. The biggest question for me, Amir, is not the offense. We know this. It's not Lamar. Yeah. It's not the usage of Deontay Johnson, maybe if he can get more involved. It's the defense, most notably the secondary, which Kyle Hamilton got banged up last week. How healthy is he going to be for this matchup up ahead? It's the secondary. It's the defensive questions for Baltimore. And that's why I said if it comes down to a running game, I'm going to take the offense that's at home in this matchup that makes minimal mistakes. And I think Justin Herbert's just as he's a tier below Lamar Jackson, but he's still an elite quarterback. Again, this offense has also been more comfortable throwing the ball as of late. But I'm taking the Chargers here at home, man. I think they're the underdogs in this one, but I'm not scared. I like them here at home.
Man, this is a great matchup. I was going to lean towards the Chargers, but I think last week, Cincy was able to kind of pick apart some weaknesses in that defense. And so I think for Baltimore going into this week, the Chargers defense has looked lights up the entire year, basically consistent, willing this team up for wins. But I think Baltimore can honestly kind of look at the film and kind of analyze the Chargers defense and kind of pick away some pieces. Now, you brought up a great point. My biggest concern is that Baltimore defense. This is by far the worst defense I've seen, with Lamar being a starter on this team, and Zach Orr. I mean, as the D coordinator, obviously the first year we're really taking that next step. But it's like, I mean, you have a elite secondary. Your front seven is great too, as far as personnel. But it's like, man, they can't guard a stop sign. Like they are blowing coverages, getting beat over top, getting burnt. Marcus Williams has been struggling. Jamar Chase has been tearing Marlon Humphrey apart, and so. I think for this Chargers team, man, Herbert might throw for 250, but honestly, the one thing I don't like to bet against is Lamar Jackson after a loss. We all know the Ravens bounce back after losses pretty well, and so but I think last week the Chargers almost blowing that lead. But I think Baltimore can honestly get it done.
Yeah, again, it's hard to argue against potentially the MVP of the league here 12 weeks into an NFL season. Now we can run through this rather quickly, but. Let's get into it. Our Week 12 power rankings. A lot of things have changed. And Amir, for the first time all season long, the Chiefs are not going to be our number 1 teams. And again, that's a spoiler, but you all could have expected it. Let's get into it. Where did the Chiefs land? Let's start off with my top 10. I have Washington dropping 3 spots here, of course, after last week. But a lot of teams just played better than them. And I think they have a big statement game opportunity here against Dallas, But Washington's been good. It's just the inconsistencies, and like you mentioned all season, they rely too much on the rookie and Jaden Daniels. At number 9, I have the LA Chargers. I love them. Minimal mistakes. They run the football, old school style of offense, but they still have they still have the elite quarterback to take them over the top. And this passing offense is coming around the corner. It's getting better and better each week. And Ladd McConkey, I think, is second or third in rookie receiving yards. I like him a lot. At number 8, Green Bay, it's Jordan Love, and I think they have a big opportunity this week to get a huge win against a team that they haven't been able to beat in recent years in the San Francisco 49ers. I think, hey, if you get Jaden Reed a little bit more involved, Christian Watson came around last week. They have it all to be a sneaky contender here in the NFC. But again, I want to see him get one more big win before I jump them into my top 5. At 7 is Minnesota. They won. I understand that. They've won 4 in a row, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same time, I think other teams have just played better at this point in the season. And we've also had questions about Sam Darnold as far as the last couple of weeks. Philly, I mean, who's played better than them the last couple of weeks? I mean, not many, if any. But again, with how they started the season, that's why they're at number 6. If they play like this, I don't think any team in the NFC is going to beat them outside of the Detroit Lions. And number 5 is the Baltimore Ravens. You lost last week, a tough divisional game. You lost to 6 field goals from Chris Boswell. I mean, how often does that happen? Oh, well, I guess pretty often there in Pittsburgh. But for Baltimore, well, you need Justin Tucker to figure out his issues, right? One of the all-time greats at his position. But they have it all, man. I think they just need to finish games, and that's really the situation. That's why they've lost 4 games instead of 2 or 1 even. They just need to finish games there in Baltimore. And number 4, the team that they lost to in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mr. Unlimited has really been that. He has stepped in, and Mike Tomlin made a questionable decision. They were a dominant football team with Justin Fields. He handed over the keys to Russell Wilson, and that was the right decision. This offense has been electric, scoring almost 30 points a game with Russell at the helm. So again, Pittsburgh, dominant defense. The offense is really good, and they're the top 4 team in the league. And number 3, Amir, is this a shock? I would say so. I have Buffalo at 3. We've had questions about Buffalo all year, and actually, I've been just a little bit higher on them than you all year. And it's for the same reasons that you've said the last couple of weeks. I'm worried about this team when it matters most.
Yeah.
How many times have we seen this? I mean, Josh Allen is 5-1 in his career against Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. Postseason, it doesn't really work out. And I base these things based on who are the top 10 teams I think are most likely to win the Super Bowl on a weekly basis. Buffalo, I just can't see them beating the Kansas City Chiefs at number 2 in the playoffs when it matters most. Look, Kansas City, you were 9-0. You're a little bit tired. You have this extra added pressure of, the undefeated streak that you were on. I think now they can play a little bit more free going forward and get back to being the dominant early season team that we saw. And Pacheco is coming back. So that's going to add another element to this Chiefs offense. Detroit, number 1. Any shock? I don't think so. The thing I like about Detroit, Amir, is that they don't play down to their competition. That's been a complaint from us about Philly the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Detroit just blows you out. I mean, it's like Madden, right? Playing against a little brother. You just want to blow them out as much as you can and really make a statement. I love their mentality, and they're at number 1 for me. Amir, let's get into your top 10. It looks like you also have Jaden Daniels and the Commanders at number 10, dropping a couple spots just like me.
Yep. So in my 10th spot, I have Washington, and I said this last week. My biggest concern about this team is that in the long run, they're going to ask for Jaden Daniels to do way too much. And Jaden Daniels, obviously after his rib injury, he kind of struggled the week after. And honestly, I mean, the past, I think like 3 weeks, he's really been struggling a lot more often. And it could be the rib injury, which is definitely concerning. But I mean, Dan Quinn even said in the interview that, he's fully healthy, he's not hurt. So I mean, that's even more concerning if he's healthy and he's struggling. But this team has honestly dropped a few spots. They're still a really good team. The defense has been playing good, despite Saquon tearing them up last week. But they're at number 10 for me. At number 9, I have Minnesota. Sam Darnold has been struggling, and Minnesota has been winning games still. But every team above them has played better, in my opinion. At the 8th spot, I have Houston. Even though Houston has lost some games, Nico Collins is back. The defense is finally getting back healthy. The offense is back healthy. They looked great last week. The offense looked great. The defense looked a bit shaky, but overall, I think Houston is better than both these teams. And my 7th spot, Green Bay as well. Jay Love, even when he's out or he's not healthy, they still win games. And this Green Bay team can be a sneaky pick to really go on a run. I think
Yes.
LaFleur is a great coach. He's still finding ways to win this team games. The only reason why they dropped down 2 spots is simply because I think 2 teams that's over them really has been playing lights out. And by 6 spot,
Yeah.
Philadelphia, one of those
Hard to argue.
teams. Philly is playing great, man. I honestly gave them credit early in the podcast already. The defense has been lights out up front and in the back end. The secondary has had a huge improvement, which is honestly what made them lose games last year. And so I think Philly is in my 6 spot. 5th spot, I have Baltimore. I was going to move them lower, but I'm not going to take away last week because I think Pittsburgh is honestly just playing that good. You brought up a great point earlier. This Baltimore defense has been absolutely terrible, and that's honestly super concerning. And Lamar looked human last week, and so I hope it doesn't really sort of lead to their downfall for the rest of the regular season. But at my 4th spot, I have Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is playing crazy. Dennis Allen, I apologize because the offense looks amazing. The defense is still great. And man, Russ is playing amazing. And I've always said it. I've always thought Russ was a better quarterback than Fields as of now. But Pittsburgh was winning games with Fields, and honestly, I don't want them to move off of Fields because they were winning games. But you go and you add Russ in, they honestly look dominant, and it's really crazy because offensively, I mean, they really don't have any like major firepower aside from Pickens maybe, and so it's
Mike
like
Tomlin effect.
right,
Teams always play
Tomlin.
over what they should be.
Always, man. It's amazing. And so at my 3 spot, I had KC. I didn't want to move them to 3, but the fact that every game for them this year has been close and sort of a sweaty matchup. Um, but at my 2 spot, I have Buffalo, and I keep saying it. Me, I'm a Josh Allen guy myself, and I love Josh Allen. That's my favorite player in the league. But this team still concerns me, man. Like they're in my 2 spot, but it's like I really believe Buffalo is it's like a couple of injuries away from really just kind of like taking a huge drop off, and we've seen this offense sort of really struggle the second they lose one receiver, or 2 receivers. We've seen them get completely blown out by Houston and Baltimore just because they lost a guy or two, and that really can really truly concerns me. But my
Yes.
1 spot, Detroit, they're great on both sides of the ball. The run defense is great. The offense is lights out. Jared Goff, had a really good bounce back game, from throwing 5 picks. To last week throwing for 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And so shout out Goff. The defense looked better. I said the secondary still can be their biggest downfall. With all the penalties and stuff like that. But honestly, I mean, Kirby Joseph is forcing turnovers.
Yes.
Brian Branch as well, and so I think Detroit's doing a really good job of, sort of, forcing those turnovers for the points that they're giving up.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's hard for you to admit, saying where you are, the people that you're around on a daily basis, but
Yeah,
Detroit is number one finally.
they are.
And I don't know, it's just like Kansas City's 9-0 start. It seems too good to be true for Detroit right now. It seems like they might, eventually stub their toe right along the way and maybe lose a game that they shouldn't. Now, I will say before we move on from the power rankings, some teams outside on the bubble for me, Arizona and Houston for me.
Oh
Of
yeah,
course, Arizona for you as well, Amir. Maybe the Chargers in that mix as well. If Arizona gets another win, Amir, I'm telling you right now, both of my favorite quarterbacks are going to be in the top 10 next week, and Kyler Murray and Jordan Love. Now, there's been a lot of buzz going around, a lot of rumors, of course, a lot of news around the New York Jets organization. And it really, I wanted to think about it. I want to say, are the Jets in the worst situation out of all 32 franchises for the next, let's say, 5 years? And I wanted to really look at every team's future. And again, I wanted to take everything into account, the quality of their coaching, their head coach situation now. Are they going to have this guy for the next couple years, or are they going to have to get a new face in there pretty soon? Their quarterback situation, any potential bad contracts, and just their overall salary cap situation, their current and young talent, as well as draft capital. Again, we're looking at everything. And I asked Amir, just like myself, who is in the worst situation possible over the next 5 years? Amir, I kind of mentioned him there. Who is your answer? Who do you think has the worst future ahead of them for the next 5 years?
So for me, when I was looking at these teams, I really didn't want to just go with a cliche answer and list a team that's already bad, but rather I decided to lean towards a team that sort of has talent, but they're only going to fall down from here, and that's the New York Jets. And so my biggest concern about the Jets, obviously defensively, they still have some great pieces. You got Sauce Gardner, you got Quentin Williams, and the defense, should be anchoring this team. But I mean, honestly, right now it's not even really like a personnel problem. It's a structural problem,
Yes,
from the top down. And
great
seeing this
point.
offense, have talent and seeing them be terrible. But it's like now, I mean, you have Jordan Travis on the bench, learning behind Rodgers. I don't know if next year that's going to be the guy because it's reports coming out saying that,
Rodgers is
Rodgers might
done.
be gone, and so for the Jets, it's like, do you go ahead and pick a quarterback up in the draft? Do you wait in the future? And it's like, if you wait, I don't know if all these pieces defensively, and offensively are going to be there. And on top of that, they're also in the bottom seven as far as cap space. And so I think this Jets team really is in a really bad spot right now. And me and you both honestly had them at worst winning 9 games
Yes.
at worst. But it's like now it's the complete opposite. They've been terrible on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. Now, I mean, again, I think the three most important positions in any NFL organization is the quarterback, the head coach, and the GM. And if you have questions at all three of those, I mean, well, I'll say this: if you have questions at one of those, the season might not go the way that you think it will or that you hope it will. But if you have questions at all three, I mean, that's problematic. Now, even if you want to come back at me and say, "Hey, Owen, they're a coach away," and I agree, they're a head coach away. But that also comes with a culture change. Is
Yeah.
everybody going to buy into this culture change? I mean, let's say they get the best of the best. They get Ben Johnson or Mike Vrabel, or let's say Bill Belichick comes out of retirement for the New York Jets. I think it's still going to take 2 years, let's say. But they also got to figure out this quarterback, like you mentioned. Aaron Rodgers is gone. At least that's what all reports say. Is it Jordan Travis? I mean, a guy that only played one real season of college football before
Yeah.
getting hurt. It's been over a year and a half since Jordan Travis has played football. So is he the guy? Or do you go out and you pick up a different quarterback? Maybe Daniel Jones stays in New York, right? I guess what's the direction of this team going forward? They have all the young talent, but like you mentioned, it was a great point. It's a structural issue. Now, for me, like you did, I wanted to go with a team that's kind of just stuck in a purgatory state where they're good enough to, I guess, avoid being a top five or being, having a top five pick, but they're not good enough to make the playoffs, right? Or at least be a contender in their conference. It's the New Orleans Saints. I mean, not only are they bottom three in cap situation, they have so many injuries to all these veteran players that they do have. And all these veteran players that they do have, they're just not great anymore, right? Outside of maybe Demario Davis and Alvin Kamara, they don't have any great players on this roster. And as far as young talent, I mean, Chris Olave, but how much longer is he going to play before he decides these concussions are way too much? I'm just going to hang it up. And then when you talk about a guy like Luis Fuaga, offensive line, love him out of Oregon State. Shout out to him. But outside of that, how much young talent does this team actually have as building blocks going forward? Alvin Kamara is great, but he's older, right? As a running back, we know that their shelf life is 30 years old. And at that point, they're going to decline rather quickly throughout the next couple of years. I just think with Derek Carr as their quarterback now, Amir, they're going to go win 2 to 3 more games throughout the regular season, and they're not going to be in a position to get a Shedeur Sanders, to get a Cam Ward, guys that could potentially be a franchise quarterback. And that's step one of changing a franchise's direction. They're not good enough to even make the playoffs, I think, but they're good enough to avoid being a bottom five pick, if that makes sense. They're good, not great, and they're just going to be endlessly stuck in this state of purgatory where they're never going to be bad enough to get these franchise altering players. Amir, your thoughts on the Saints here?
The Saints are, in a really interesting spot. And, me and you both, I think I had them winning like 4 games before the year. And
Yeah,
they
I mean, I
started the
was
season off electric. They started the season off lights out. Clint Kubiak had the offense rolling. Derek Carr was rolling. And it's like ever since then, I mean, they had a stretch where it's like they lost to the Chiefs, Eagles, Falcons, and then lost like 4 straight after that. And the Saints now it's like, I mean, it's too far in
it
to,
was
to
seven
make the
straight.
playoffs. Right, right.
Yeah,
Which is crazy. And so it's too far in to make the playoffs. And you brought up a great point. It's like now they're like I feel like the Steelers, except Mike Tomlin is in there.
you're right.
And like for years the Steelers were like 8-8, 9-8 or whatever, and teams wanted him fired. Except now it's like the Saints, are nowhere even near close to the levels the Steelers are at. And so I think for the Saints, I mean, especially with the cap space too, I mean, you already paid Derek Carr. And so now it's like they're in a really bad spot. Should you go ahead and just reset completely? Just kind of eat this cap space and just figure it out from here.
Yeah. Again, both teams are not in favorable situations going forward. But that is our take. Again, we could easily say the Panthers, but we're going to go for teams that are trying to be relevant, and they're not doing a very good job at that, at least not for the right reasons. But let's get into our best bets on the week, and we can run through this fairly quickly. Player props. To me, Amir, you can kick it off here. You have a Thursday night play, and what is that?
So my first play I have is for George Pickens over 58.5 receiving yards. I saw this line. I said this line is way too low in my
I
opinion.
agree.
It's way too low. I mean, George Pickens has covered this line um, every single week since this Russ has been the starter. We all know this. I think his lowest, longest
89
reception
yards was like his lowest with Russ, I think.
right, yeah, which is absolutely crazy. I mean, he's getting fed. Russ has been really stretching the ball on the field, and so I think this line is way too low. Only thing I say that could really get in the way of this is the fact that it's the Browns. So they're kind of used to playing against them. But I think with Russ and this offense and how shaky the Browns defense has been, I think he clears this with no problem.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big play guy, and the Browns have a lot of big play miscommunication this season. So George Pickens, it only takes one play for him to get these yards on the Browns. At least that's what the last couple of weeks have told us. Now, another guy that is has had 10 straight seasons of 1,000 receiving yards, and he's trying to get to 11. This is the guy that has been hurt the last couple of weeks. And right now, he's only at about 340 yards on the season. He needs to get some work done, and he has a pretty good quarterback to do it. I'm going with Mike Evans over 50 receiving yards. I think this line is incredibly too low. I know he's been injured, but Mike Evans is Mike Evans, right? I mean, he was playing through a hamstring against the Ravens. He still marched the team down the field and had like 30 yards on that first drive and caught a touchdown. Mike Evans needs to continue this, I guess, legendary streak. And I'm going to say he gets back on track here against a favorable New York Giants defense. And I think the Tampa Bay Bucks can have their way against a Tommy DeVito led Giants team. So I'm going to take the two receivers here, of course, to go over their receiving yards prop. Now, our favorite spread pick on the week. I'm not scared. I'm going to take the Chargers. I believe in them. Of course, if I have them winning, I'm not going to tell you guys to go a different direction. I think they win this ball game. Now, if you want to go with an actual spread, go with Tampa Bay -5 against the Giants. Love that play. But I'm going to go with the Chargers here on Monday night in the Harbaugh Bowl. Jim finally gets a win. Amir, your favorite spread pick on the week?
My favorite is the New England Patriots +7.5 against Miami, and I think this number is way too big, for Miami
Yes,
to,
a lot of
to
points.
be to be 8-point favorites. I think that's way too high. Me personally, I'm still leaning towards Miami winning this game, but I think Miami wins by like a field goal or like 4 or 5 points at max.
Yeah, I would have to agree there. I was actually going to take that pick before you stole it, or you got your pick in before me, so that's obviously my fault. Our favorite over-unders on the week. I'm going to go back to that Tampa Bay matchup. I think Tampa Bay is going to win this game, let's say 23-17 or something like that, if not 30-13. Regardless, something like that. And I'm going to have Tampa Bay and the Giants going over 39.5 points
I
over
like
on
that.
DraftKings at the moment. I just think that line is incredibly too low here. Again, it's not going to be bad weather in New York this weekend. So I like that line. Amir, you're going back to the Thursday night play.
I'm going right back. Mine is over 36.5 points. Me personally, I think this game is going to be a bit more high scoring than everyone thinks. Just for the simple fact, and I brought it up earlier. Pittsburgh's defense has been great, but in the past 5 weeks, they're ranked around that 18th or 19th mark. Pass yards given up per game, and so we all know Jameis throws the ball 35 plus times a game. Um, you know whether he has 5 picks or not, he's airing the ball out. I think the Browns are going to be able to score some points in Pittsburgh as well. The Browns defense has been sort of middle of the pack. And I think Pittsburgh has covered this line. I want to say 6 out of the 7 last games they played. So
I just want to say, look out for the weather. Of course, it's pretty bad weather here in Ohio. So just be on the lookout. If it continues to get worse and worse, maybe just take an alternate line, a couple points
yep.
down, right? We always like to take alternate lines. But yeah, those are our favorite over-unders on the week. Last thing, Amir, is for the we got something for everybody, right? If your team sucks, your team's good. If your team's in the middle, we got something for you. These are for the teams that suck. And we are on this list, of course, at number 3 with the Cleveland Browns. But this is the race for Travis Hunter or Shador Sanders. You could just say race for the number 1 overall pick. Jacksonville stays at 1. Tennessee goes up to 2. Cleveland jumps up to 3. Vegas at 4 as Shador Sanders continues to really hint. I guess not at this point, it's so obvious. He wants to be a Las Vegas Raider. After every single win, he is not tweeting anything for the Raiders. After every single loss, he's saying, thank you, God, immediately after the Raiders lose. So Obviously, he wants to go to Las Vegas. And number 5 is the Giants. They moved down 2 spots. And I think this is going to be the top 5 here, unless any drastic changes happen. But I think this is pretty safely going to be the top 5 by the season's end. Maybe Carolina sneaks in for New York. They're at the bottom of the list. Any additional thoughts on these guys, Amir? Of course, we know it's going to be Travis Hunter and some quarterbacks at the top of the draft.
I would say the team that could potentially get pushed out is Las Vegas, in my opinion. But if I'm Las Vegas, I'm doing every single thing I can to try to either trade up or just tank for for a QB. And honestly, I mean, looking at Las Vegas the past couple of weeks, I mean that team looks serviceable.
Yes.
Like they've been able to somewhat make games competitive, and so I don't know, maybe they win a couple games and get pushed out of that top 5, but. On top of that, I mean, they still got to play the Chargers, I think, the Broncos, and the Chiefs one more time.
time. Yeah.
Right, and so, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of tough games for Las Vegas coming up. But that's going to do it. Week 12 picks and futures. So of course, we talked about the Saints and the Jets there for a little bit. We did everything, best bets and more. Amir, any last thoughts before we get out of here, man? Episode 228 next week, Thanksgiving special here on the channel. That'll be a fun one. But Amir, any last thoughts?
No last thoughts.
Well, we'll see you guys next week. Go enjoy some football and, well, for what it means, go Cleveland Browns.